BorderLoreLive. We're here today with José Soto. Before we begin, I want to give a shout out to Kate Jewett-Williams, who is our tech person. So she's behind the scenes making all this run smoothly. And I just wanted to introduce her before she goes away. Thank you, Kate. We also have with us today two ASL interpreters, and they'll be signing throughout the conversation. So we're really grateful to have them. And let's see, I think we can go ahead and get started. It's a hot day. We're really glad that you've all joined us on your lunch break. We are here to talk about dance and baile folklorico and the beautiful traditions of that come by way of Mexico to the United States, and with artists like Jose, who is keeping them alive. So José Soto is the director of Tradiciones, a baile folkloric group based in Phoenix. He is also the recipient of a 2019 Southwest Folklife Alliance Master Apprentice Artist Award. And this award honors tradition bearers, traditional artists, culture bearers in the state of Arizona who are working to pass on traditions. And before we get started, I just want to say that we have a deadline coming up of July 1st to nominate artists for that award. So if there's somebody in your community who is doing the work of passing on heritage in traditional forms, could be art forms, could be heritage practices, you can check that information out on our website. And we southwestfolklife.org, and we're really excited to read any new nominations that come in this year. So Jose, thank you so much for being here today. How are you doing?
Doing good. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to sit here and have this conversation with everyone, and I hope it's enjoyable and it's something that people can learn from and can also be inspired by. So thank you for having me.
Beautiful. So let's just get started by having you talk a little bit about how you came to the form of baile folklorico and where you learned and what drew you to this particular form of dance.
Well, it's actually, it goes back to when I was a young boy. I grew up in the state of Sinaloa in Mexico. I actually lived there up until the age of 10. And in schools in Mexico, it's a tradition to dance for the different festivals. They have, El Día de la Revolución, El Día de las Madres, Mexican Mother's Day. Just the different festivities all require the students from different grade levels to put together pieces. So that's how I became involved in Mexican folk dance initially in Mexico. And then when we moved to the States, to California, my mom became a volunteer at the school that I attended, the elementary school, and she began to prepare these festivities. She kind of wanted to replicate what we had in Mexico in our small school in Cantua Creek back in California. And the community was predominantly agricultural workers from different parts of Mexico, and they quickly grew to really like the idea of having these festivities, and parent involvement became very strong because of these festivities. And that's how I continued my learning of folklorico in elementary school through my mom, through my mother. And in high school, a group of friends and I decided that we would start our own group, so we would learn from videos. Once my mom wasn't able to really teach us anymore because we were in high school, we would learn from videos. And in attending college, I decided to choose a college that had a strong folklorico group. So I attended CSU Fresno, and and just kept with it. I just kept dancing, and it became such a big part of my life, and it also a safe haven for me to really uh, be active, and in doing so, I, I I I probably didn't know it back then, but it kept me focused and away from doing other things that I guess could have gotten me in trouble. I don't know.
And what was it specifically about dance? I mean, you know, I'm also a dancer. I don't do folklorico, but I'm just curious about you. What is it that, you know, the feeling of that particular style? I know there are many styles within folklorico, but what is it about that and your body, you know, that brings to life, or what drew you in sort of that embodiment of the form, especially from a young age, right? You know, not all boys gravitate to dance, or they do for a while and then sometimes fall into sports, you know. So I'm curious about you for that embodiment and how that happened and what it felt like.
It for me, it was watching a group of boys do el baile de los machetes, which is a dance routine that it's predominantly from different states in Mexico have dances that involve machetes or machetes, which are long, um, knife-looking, you know, cutting utensils used in. They used to use them whenever they used to cut the sugarcane in agriculture in Mexico. They would cut the sugarcane with the machetes, but also to just get rid of the weed, get rid of the bushes that were in the middle of the crops. So when I watched this group of boys do the Machetes dance, that's when I became intrigued by it. I mean, the routines were so elaborate, and they would toss the machete and catch it and not get caught. They would then bend down and hit the machetes between their legs and under their legs, and they would jump at the same time. And it just became so intriguing for me as to how they could do that. And I became interested in learning how to dance so I could do something like that. I like the challenge. I like the challenge uh, of different dance pieces that are traditional dances from Mexico. Little by little, I became interested in dancing other pieces because of the challenge. Uh, there's also the component of rhythm. I remember back when we started dancing in elementary school, we danced to a lot of banda music, and banda music is mainly percussion instruments, some wind instruments, but just the beat of the music, and that how it felt to my body. My body really responded well to, you know, to the beat and following that beat, and it just made me happy. It made me happy, and it made me uh, forget about whatever else was going on in the day that was not so great. I remember looking forward to staying after school to dance, to rehearse dance. Even if my day had been horrible, you know, I looked forward to staying after school and practicing the dances that we were learning.
I love that. Thank you. It's such a testimony to how the art form is passed along through peers and teachers. You know, this idea of you watching these older kids or men do this dance and then wanting to replicate that. I love that. I mean, it says so much about why we need arts in the schools, for instance.
Yeah, and you're right. You are absolutely 100% correct. A lot of boys shy away from it because they think it's not masculine. It's not, they see it as something feminine. And I remember having a really hard time getting my friends to dance in elementary school and in high school Uh, I remember that it was, I had to really kind of beg them to do it, but once they were there, they enjoyed it, and they put all stereotypes aside, and it's really hard. It's really hard coming from, especially a Latino family, a Mexican family. You grow up with this image of what a man should be, and how you need to be this macho, this macho role model, and you can't do this, you can't do that because it's not manly. And just to see some of my friends actually break out of that shell and actually try it out, it was really neat to see. And we continued it through high school, and then some of us continued in college, but not all of us.
Mhm.
Some of us fell through. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. And who were your primary teachers? You mentioned your mom as being, a big influence on you. And then, but in the lineage of this learning, are there any particular teachers that stand out to you, or that you have stories about, that you learned from?
When my my fondest memories of learning this for the first time were actually from learning from my mom at the beginning. I do remember learning from my teachers in Mexico different dances, but I don't. I was very young. I must have been 7, 8, 6, 7, 8 years old. So the memories of you know those dances and what they taught are 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 not very uh, present. Uh, but I do recall my mom teaching with so much passion and devoting herself so wholeheartedly uh, to going to the school and working with a different grade level after school every day to prepare for this big festival. And initially at the beginning, it was, they were making the costumings for the girls, the skirts, out of curtains. They would just take curtains that they didn't use anymore at home. I remember my mom made uh, the first skirt she made was out of some curtains that we had laying around in the house. And the ribbons to this skirt, she used crepe paper.
Mm-hmm.
So that paper that looks a little fabric-like.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that that year, there was only about 2 girls that danced with actual fabric skirts, and the rest of the girls danced with paper skirts. So they actually made paper skirts for the rest of the girls. And I recently ran into a picture of of that first initial group that started back in my elementary school, and just her passion and the way that she transmitted that passion to the rest of the community, and getting involved and just watching the ladies come to my mom's house or come to our house in the evenings and just get together and sew. It was just such a happy time that really resonates with me in terms of my earliest memories of what folklorico meant to me back then, what it represented. It wasn't just a dance form, it was a way to get people involved and a way to get people excited about something. We lived in a community that the nearest city was an hour away, and it was in the middle of the California fields. And we had mass uh, on Saturdays at a nearby uh, tiny church, and the priest traveled there on Saturdays because he had to give mass at the other churches on Sunday. So we were a really small community, and this gave people something to look forward to. This gave people something to do. It gave people something to be excited about. Moving on to high school, we began to teach ourselves. And a big influence was El Ballet Folklorico de Amalia Hernandez, which is I would say is, in my opinion, it's the number one Mexican folk dance troupe in the world. It really, it has put Mexico on the map, and it's a little bit more. It's not as traditional. They take traditional aspects of Mexican folk dance, and they combine. Uh, they use those elements along with ballet techniques and contemporary techniques, and they put together a show. But I remember watching videos and trying to replicate some of the dance steps and some of the dance forms. And I remember thinking, oh, well, we can't kick that high, but we can kick, or we can try to do that zapateado, or that combination. And we would tweak it here and there. And in college, I began to have more of an experience working with different maestros. Our director was actually one of the founding members of the National Folklorico Conference that happens here in the States every year. It started back in the 70s. And as part of the Chicano movement, he actually started this folklorico group in Fresno State. Ernesto Martinez is his name. He passed away some years back, but he was one of the pioneers of the Chicano movement through dance, through in the Mexican folk dance aspect of it through the universities in California. But because of him, I attended different conferences throughout Mexico and the United States, where we learned from different teachers from Mexico. And my knowledge of folklorico, just when I thought I knew everything, it was like, whoa, I know this much of what Mexican folk dance has to offer. So
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, one thing I'm thinking about as you're talking is this sense of, with folklorico, there's this representation from the many regions of the country. And I'm trying to think if there's, a United States equivalent of that. I mean, I think now young dancers and old dancers will borrow urban regional styles, but I'm trying to think of like any traditional traditional forms that are then performed all over the country. So it strikes me as so beautiful that these forms is that when when you're learning, you are learning these regional interpretations, and so you come well versed in the country of Mexico because you're understanding some of this vernacular expression and these dance forms. Can you talk a little bit about sort of that regional identity that then you learn when you learn to dance these different forms?
Most definitely, I think that it's one of the things that has kept us so excited about learning every year. We are now celebrating our 10th year anniversary as a dance company here in Phoenix. We started back in 2010, and every year we try to put on this big, elaborate show for our community to attend, and so that they can, see what we've been working on that whole year in terms of repertoire. And every year it just becomes, I learn something new every year. Mexico has 31 states. I may be wrong, it's either 31 or 32, but every state in Mexico has 3 or 4, sometimes a plethora of dance forms. I mean, if you look at the state of Michoacan, for example, it has dances that are traditional, that really depict a way of life, that way of life either takes place up in the mountains, or it takes place by the coast, or it takes place in Tierra Caliente, which is more the inland part of Mexico. So it's dances, traditional Mexican dances don't just follow state lines, but they also follow regions. So if you look at La Tierra Caliente, which in English would be the hot, earth or the hot land, it refers to, that central part of Mexico that's shared by different states, Estado de Mexico, Michoacán, all these states share this region that tends to be, a little more arid, a little bit more hot, and the dances from those regions kind of replicate, or they kind of resemble each other in the different states. You also have that same phenomenon happening with Las Huastecas. So there's a region called La Huasteca, and it's shared by Veracruz, San Luis Potosí, Tamaulipas. And the characteristics of that region, are, you could see them in these different state dances or traditional dances. The only thing that may be different is the attire or the costuming they wear. In terms of what has shaped traditional Mexican folk dances and into what they are now, we are really a combination of the different roots that exist in Mexico, which are the indigenous, of course, the Spanish, but also the African root. So the African root is called La Tercera Raíz. Not a lot of people think of it as, influencing Mexico, but Mexico is part of the slave trade as well. So Mexico also had plantations, and they also had the need for labor, and they a lot of the plantation owners owned slaves, and mostly in the states of Veracruz and the Gulf states and the Caribbean states, Veracruz, Yucatan, Campeche. You see a little bit more of that African feel. There's a little bit more hip movement. There's a little bit more harsh movements with the body. But you're also able to see, for example, in Yucatan, there's dances that they dance with their hands up in the air. And that's a direct, that's really, that was taken from La Jota, which is a type of dance in Spain that was brought over to Mexico. So you see all these elements of dance being incorporated into the different traditional pieces that states now have to represent themselves. And it's really unique. A lot of times when we dance polkas from the state of Chihuahua, we'll have someone in the audience say, oh my gosh, that sounds very similar to something we would dance in school when we did square dancing, or when we did our polkas, and then I'll go into the explanation of, indeed, Mexico had a great migration from European countries, such as Poland, such as Germany. A lot of these people were fleeing the wars. They didn't want to be part of being stuck in the middle, or they were persecuted. So they moved to Mexico, which at that time was a very neutral country. It wasn't really on one side or the other. And you have a very high population of descendants from these European countries in northern Mexico. And that's why Chihuahua, which is one of the northern states, has a lot of that influence. The polkas, the chotices. In their music, you hear the accordion. It's just so beautiful that every state has its own unique dance forms, but also every region has those dance forms as well, and they speak to the history of the land, the history of the country, the migration that has happened throughout the centuries, and And now we're able to really take those dance pieces and use them as educational tools and tell stories. And we tell these stories to our kids, and they love hearing how, why we dance on a box in Yucatan. We tell them the story of how the wooden boxes, the almudes, were units of measure. That's how people measure the rice. That's how people measure the beans. They measure by the almud. Well, after everything was said and done at the end of the day, and people were uh, just mingling, they would take those almudes and they would dance on top of them and create competitions and create kind of challenges for one another. So it's really vast. It's really exciting for me to just be part of this culture here in the States. And like I said, I learn something new every day as well. So
it does seem so vast, and it just seems endless in terms when you start thinking about the movements of regions, of people, of workers, and the ways that we use our body both for work and celebration. It's lovely to hear you talk about it. One thing I'm curious about, oftentimes for visitors to Mexico or even visitors to the Southwest, there can be sometimes like a tourist angle to baile folklorico. And I also hear you talking about, this movement from purely traditional to some contemporary influences. I'm just curious about where, what your thoughts are on that, and where you fall as a director and a performer and a creator, thinking about those hard divisions between this is the tradition and this is sort of the shifting of the tradition. Does that make sense?
yeah, totally. It's something that's very controversial within the folklorico world itself.
Mm-hmm.
You have groups. You have groups nowadays. Unfortunately, you have groups that use those elements to really criticize other groups, or within Mexico itself. For example, el ballet folklorico de Mal Hernández, Ballet Folklorico de Mexico, it's very widely criticized for only allowing people of certain heights to join their group. If you're a female, you have to be 5'8" and above. If you're a male, you have to be 6 feet and above, and you have to take contemporary, you have to take ballet to be able to do the routines. I think that everything is important. I think that it is all worth respecting and understanding. Within our dance company, we have tried to be very careful about how we portray ourselves as a dance company, because we didn't want to offend any people that are still very attached to those traditions. A very good example is that up until this day, we have yet to do La Danza del Venado, which is a very popular piece that is done by very many folklorico groups. We have been in existence 10 years, and we have really tried to, not just put it on stage just to put it on stage, because we understand the history and the importance behind that dance piece or that ritual, because it's actually a ritual in the state of Sonora and Sinaloa, and even here in Arizona we have the Yaquis, which is a tribe. The Yaquis. This ritual of going into this stance of becoming a deer, and what that feels like and what that looks like, and what we have yet we don't really, we're not educated on that subject, and one day we'd really like to get permission from the Yaquis to actually go and understand what the ritual is about, and really do it justice, and not just put anything on stage just because it looked like something fun to put on stage.
As a show. Yeah.
As a show, we also understand the importance that we have now as the new bearers of this tradition, to make it enticing and also exciting for new generations, so that when we put it on stage, it's not something that turns people off, yet it's something that really excites people and they want to learn more about. So there's a saying that a lot of people in Mexico use, and a lot of people in the States use, that the moment that you take something from the village and you replicate it on stage, it becomes a show. And there's some truth to that. I think that you can be respectful and also make it a show. One of the things that we really have strived to do in the last few years, and one of the things that, being the recipients of the award last year, of the Apprentice Award, was we've been able to travel to Mexico, travel to the different parts, different states, where they still do these traditional, town festivities, where they actually, they come out with the big heads, they come out with the whips, they come out with, all these elements that represent something to them. And we try to learn about those elements, and we try to learn as much as we can before we put something on stage. We also try to be true to the costuming, and if it's a floral pattern, well, what types of flowers are accepted? Because we can't really go out to the fabric store and buy Hawaiian fabric prints and then create a dance piece costume that doesn't really correctly depict that state. So it's I think it's a very thin line. I think that it is my personal belief, and something that we try to instill in our company members, that we need to respect all the elements of the dance form, and we also need to understand that in order to carry on, we need to also cater to the new generations, and maybe doing that in a show, but also speak to the traditional, the raw form, where it originated, and how it began, and why it's been adapted to what the audience sees now.
It sounds complicated and rich territory, for artistry, and that it sort of mirrors the conversations that are happening right now in so many art forms. I mean, what you're saying is reminding me of the discussion within Mariachi also about tradition and shifting, and how to traditionalist versus keeping things relevant to new audiences and new participants. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about it all. We have thought about these conversations as thinking about resilience, and so what you're saying really feels like it's fitting into that concept of how understanding the root or origin of a tradition or a practice or a dance is part of understanding how to adapt it. I'm just thinking a lot about adaptation and resilience, and I know that as a dancer with a company, you've had to really think about how to shift gears in the last 3 months. do you want to talk a little bit about the challenges, just briefly about, sort of how you rehearse as a company in this particular digital moment, and, when proximity and touch is sort of prohibited?
Yeah, the latest events in our in our society in terms of health with the whole coronavirus has really made us shift, almost do like a whole 180. We were having a lot of great momentum leading up until March. We were getting ready to celebrate our 10th year anniversary, which was programmed to be this upcoming Saturday, June 27th. That's when we had our show scheduled, and this was a biggie. This was a big event that we had been looking forward to. Some of us have been with the dance company for 10 years. We have some of the kids that started with us when they were just babies. They were 6, 7, 8 years old, and now they're teenagers, and this is something that we were looking forward to. We had booked the Orpheum Theater here in Phoenix to do this. We had started working on costume pieces, and everyone was just super excited about this show. And then coronavirus really just it just kind of put a stop to everything, and we became focused more on how to stay healthy, how to keep healthy, how to be resilient, and initially it was just about staying healthy, not catching the virus, and we stopped rehearsals. We stopped rehearsals here at our dance studio. Back a year ago, we went from a 1,500 square feet place to a 4,500 square feet place. So our rent increased tremendously, but we felt like our dancers deserved a bigger space. We felt like our families deserved a bigger space. So our families have been amazing in terms of their donations, and they've been helping us out. We've been able to pay, April, May, and June's rent without having any rehearsals here at the studio. We've tried different things. I have a group that I do Zoom lessons on. We get together and we do a meeting kind of like this through Zoom, and it gets to be very complicated. It can be discouraging if you allow it to. I would make it a point to really self-talk every time I'm about to have that Zoom meeting and be like, it's all about connecting. It's all about reaching out to the kids. It's all about showing that resiliency, showing that we're still hanging in there. With other groups, I record videos of the footwork. I record videos of the dances, and I just send them out. And then they sent me the pieces, them doing those techniques. And just 2 weeks ago, we actually came back with the adult company. We came up with a plan to come back gradually. We have 6 different groups under our dance company. We have 150 dancers plus. So we started with the main company, and with a very strict set of guidelines to follow. Our space allows us to mark out, spaces 6 feet apart. We actually have them marked 8 feet apart, and because our dance space is pretty big now, thank God that we have that space to offer our dancers. But even so, families are still scared, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them being scared. If I had kids of my own, I would think twice before I sent them out anywhere on their own, or I dropped them off at a place. So we're hanging in there. You know, God has provided uh, and has shown his how great he is through the many years that we've been doing this. Because I, I like to believe that he knows that we're doing a positive thing and that we are, you know, doing something great for our community. So he will provide. I have no doubt that he will provide. And when we come back, we're gonna pick up right where we left off and have our 10-year anniversary show and have that celebration and continue to celebrate hopefully every year after that.
Beautiful. I can see it. I can see it. I just want to invite any participants in the webinar. If any folks have questions, you can type them in to the box, or you can raise your hand and then we can unmute you so you can ask them. I wanted to also ask, I want to break for soon so that you can show us some footwork, but since you were talking about the kids, I wanted you to talk a little bit about what you see in them that indicates that this sort of celebration and connection with Mexico, with these traditional forms, with the body, with the celebration, you know, what kind of opening for resilience or stamina or maturity, you know, do you witness in the kids that you've worked with over the last 10 years and longer? How does it help them?
Well, I think that something that I can't speak for everyone that migrates to this country and goes through the process of assimilating or, you know, becoming part of this great nation. But I would say that a great deal of us, a lot of us, go through this phase where we're not sure how accepted we are. We're not sure if we have anything to bring to the table as a race, as we get depicted on the media and in everything that we see as, you know, as something that we may not be. You know, I didn't like listening to the rap music growing up. I didn't like, you know, wearing the checkered shirts and the bandanas around my head, and I didn't really identify myself with the whole, you know, being a gangster or being, you know, a drug addict, or, and I think a lot of times that really clouds what we have to bring to the table. And as a kid, I remember feeling out of place. I remember not feeling accepted, not feeling like I had anything to really fall back on. And dance for me became kind of that. It became my refuge. It became what I had to bring to the table. And it felt good to learn about, you know, the dances that my grandparents had danced and my parents had danced, that, you know, that in family, that in stories my parents would tell, you know, they revolved around these dances. And I think that element exists in a lot of our kids, where all of a sudden they have something that they could call their own. All of a sudden they have something that belongs to them. It's like finding a long lost treasure and being like, look, this is what I have to bring to the table. This is what I have to offer. And they learn the stories and they learn the footwork and they learn the names to the different dance elements. And it really, you know, I've watched many kids come through our doors and they come in, you know, a lot of them are very shy at first. They're shy. They're in their shell still. And I think what dance in general and performing and just being able to express yourself with your body and align yourself to music, and oftentimes allow yourself to make that music with your feet and footwork. And I think that's so important for human development, that expression. And whether it's Mexican folk dance or any other dance form, I think it really provides the scaffolding for kids to really learn that, you know, learn risk taking, learn how, you know, perseverance works, how if you practice something, you will eventually get it, and learn about how reciprocity, you know, and teamwork, and how, hey, you worked on this piece for such a long time and now you're performing it in front of an audience. I still get teary-eyed when I perform and I see my parents in the audience. You know, it's really amazing. I think it does a lot of things. I think it does a lot for human development and kids. And so for me, it's been a very rewarding experience. And I think that, you know, we're not open to just kids from Latino descent. We have kids that walk through our doors that are, you know, from African American descent, or, you know, they're just Guatemalan, or they're just their families are white, and, you know, their kids, they want their kids to be part of this and learn about it, because maybe, you know, someone in the family, maybe one of the grandparents is, you know, from Texas, and they're like 1/4 Latino, so they want to learn about it, and it's awesome. It's awesome that, you know, this is open to everyone, and it's an avenue to get to, you know, that self-worth, you know, that self-motivation, that, you know, being able to taste the elements that can take you wherever you want to go in life, in other fields, not just dance.
Mhm. That's wonderful. So, ¿quieres bailar un poco para nosotros?
I will. I was telling Kate earlier that what's that?
You speak so beautifully about it. I don't want to have you stop speaking, but I also want you to dance a little for us.
I will definitely do it. I'm not gonna dance the whole piece because it's a long piece, but I'm going to dance, and I was originally gonna wear my charro suit and dance in my charro suit, but I came in here and it was so hot and I started sweating bullets, and I decided to stay in my practice uniform with our dance company, our Tradiciones dance company logo. But yeah, this piece that I'm gonna dance is a piece from the state of Jalisco. It incorporates mariachi music, and it's one of the most traditional or most well-known musical and dance elements throughout the world, and it really kind of represents Mexico. So here we go. I'm dancing El Astillero, and I hope that you like it. I hope you enjoy. Let me get my hat on.
Okay.
go. That was
Awesome. That was fantastic. I loved it. Stamina. That's great. And so is that are those steps that are traditionally performed by men, or can women do those as well?
so those are
You can, sorry, you can, yeah. Take a breath. So fun.
steps that are performed by both. So both men and women will do it. Some steps are different for the ladies, but in this dance itself, they're mostly the same. And ladies have skirt work to deal with. So they have a lot of skirt work. And so I often think that the role of a lady is more difficult in dance than for a man, because they have to deal with the skirt work. They also have to deal with the element of careo, which is, moving their head a certain way and just being a little bit more flirtatious.
Wow. We got somebody wrote bravo in the comments. So Alejandro Ortega wrote bravo. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, feel free if anyone else has questions, I've got a hand raised here, I think. Let's see if I can figure that out. Bonnie, I'm gonna unmute you so you can talk. Are you there, Bonnie?
Why is there no porta bra? Did you hear me?
Can you hear her, Jose?
I could hear her. I couldn't make out the question.
Why
Can
is
you-
there no porta bra? No arms. They're behind you.
Oh,
Why
okay.
is there?
So for men in this particular region, the posture for a male is with our hands behind our back, and it's really an element that portrays more of a macho stance. It's an element that kind of evolved into the whole aspect of what a male is supposed to look like for dancers from Jalisco. The men, and we must remember that the dances mostly depict daily lives, or a lot of the dances actually speak to movements or replicate movements that you would see like horses do, or animals from the farm. A lot of if we think back to early days in Mexico, when a lot of these dance forms originated, or when people started to come up with different ways to dance, they would look to nature to really kind of emulate what they saw either horses doing, or there's a lot of songs that are named after bulls, El Toro Viejo, and they really depict like the savageness of like a bull. Or in terms of the male characteristics for this region, this is where the charro originated. And the charro was directly taken from the image of El Caporal, and El Caporal was the plantation owner, the man that would go around with his chaps, and usually, he was the best dressed out of everyone else because he was the owner. And in pictures from the early days, men had their hands in the back. kind of, and it kind of just became the norm for dances from this part of Mexico. The only time you take your hands out away from your back is at the end of the dance. When you're going to end the song, you extend your right arm out, and then your partner will give you her left arm, and you twirl her, and then you bring her to you, and then you end as a couple, and that's the only time you really connect in these dances from the state of Jalisco, which are the dances that deal with like the charro and the mariachi music. But in dances from the state of Chihuahua, you actually dance holding your partner because you're dancing polkas. So you dance holding your partner, and you do the elements of dance, and you have to really work with your partner and learn how to respond to one another, because the male actually is turning her, the male is guiding her, and so that's a region where, you know, the posture is different. You're actually dancing with a partner. But in terms of Jalisco, you dance with your hands behind your back.
Spain.
Thanks, Bobby.
I'm hoping I answered the question a little bit.
Yes.
We've got another question from Gladys. Which state, region, dance/footwork is hard? So, which is the hardest footwork coming up from which region?
The hardest footwork, in my opinion, it's two states from the state of Veracruz. Veracruz has very complicated footwork. There's a lot of tap dancing involved. The men in this state will have their hands to their sides, and I believe that's done also in, because the footwork's so hard, that it allows them a little bit more freedom to move their feet without being constrained with their hands up in their upper body. So Veracruz and Yucatan. Recently, one of the boys that grew up within the dance company, Hector, and he was actually in the role of master apprentice. He was the apprentice when we applied for a scholarship last year, or for the award. He began dancing with us at the age of 13, and this was 10 years ago, and he is now the artistic director of the company. And he taught us, he brought for us some pieces from the state of Yucatan, and those pieces are very, very fast as well. So Veracruz and Yucatan have the hardest elements of footwork.
Great, thank you, Gladys. So we're just about out of time. Ha sido un placer, Jose, to talk to you today. I really enjoyed listening to you talk about this incredible tradition and the way you've carried it and the way you're continuing to pass it on. It's an honor, and I'm wishing you all the best for the next 10 years.
Thank you so much. I hope that I'm able to still dance for a good part of those 10 years, but I suspect I won't be dancing very much longer. But I'm very honored that you gave us this space to talk to our audience about what it means to do this as a hobby and the passion behind it. So thank you for giving us the space. And I'm glad that organizations like you guys exist that support the arts and support, you know, the folk arts in particular. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a beautiful day. Stay cool, stay safe.